Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Welcome to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hope you're having an amazing day today. Today I'm going to talk to you about self-compassion. I think for a lot of us, it can be pretty easy to show compassion for others, especially for the ones that we really care about, you know. We're kind, we open up our ears and our hearts to other people, you know, we really listen to other people and we make time to be there for them when they're going through difficult things or when they need us, you know. If a friend reaches out to you in a time of need, we are definitely really likely to help them out and to be there for them because we love them and we want to show empathy and we want to show compassion and we want to accept them for who they are and what they're going through and be that person that they can lean on in any situation, right? So I think it can be a little bit easier to show compassion for other people. But it can be very difficult to show compassion towards ourselves. You know, we can't always see things the way that other people kind of see things, and especially if we're going through a lot, they're going through a dark time, or there's just big issues happening in our lives, we can tend to be a little bit blindsided to reality and, you know, to love. And we tend to not, you know, love or understand or accept ourselves like we do with others when they're going through difficult things. And, you know, that could just become, for many different reasons, like whether we just, you know, we just really don't understand, and we're not even trying to understand or trying to accept that, like, this is what's supposed to happen in our life, that, like, everything happens for a reason, like, I'm going through this for a reason, because we can be so emotionally driven and emotionally heavy that we are blinded to everything else. But it's so important to accept the things that we're going through and have compassion towards ourselves. You know, some people can see self-compassion as like an act of self-indulgence or selfishness or just self-pity. And that's not the case at all. Self-compassion can really help relieve many different mental health issues, like your anxiety, your insecurity. And when we're able to show self-compassion, you know, we're able to love ourselves unconditionally. When we're able to show that empathy, that love, and the concern, not just towards others, but towards ourselves, you know, we're nourishing ourselves. You know, it's self-love. It's taking care of ourselves so that we can live life happily and healthy and, you know, with a good mindset. And it does start, you know, all within ourselves. We can't do anything unless, you know, we try to fix our inner demons and the things that are going on inside of us. And the things that we're going through, any kind of life's obstacles that are thrown at us, like I said, we can just be blindsided to reality because of all those heavy, emotionally driven things that happen in our lives on a day-to-day basis. Or, you know, maybe it's not always this big thing happening in your life, but you don't just have to show compassion for, you know, big obstacles that are thrown your way. It's compassion for little things as well, and just accepting that, like, you're allowed to have a bad day. Like, you're allowed to be grumpy once in a while. You're allowed to not, you know, be 110% yourself all the time, and it's okay to, feel compassion towards yourself for just being in a mood or just having a day or having a week or a month, but then also to show those, compassion towards yourself when you are going through big things, when life is challenging and when you got a lot going on. So I just think it's so important to talk about self-compassion so we can build that, so we can live that happy, healthy life, and we can have a good mindset towards those things and towards ourselves, because like I said, it all starts within ourselves, and we have to find that compassion and that self-love, to really accept who we are and accept the things that life are throwing at us. And if we can accept, the obstacles that we have to go through, we're going to be going through those obstacles with a lot more ease, and, we're going to be able to handle those situations just a lot better. So that's why today I'm going to talk to you about some self-compassion. I'm really going to break it down, what exactly self-compassion is. And then I'm going to talk to you what self-compassion is not. I mentioned that, self-indulgence, selfishness, or self-pity, people can kind of mistake it for that, but it's not those things. And I'm going to talk to you about that. And then we're really going to talk about how to have more self-compassion and why it is so important to have that in our lives so we can live a happier and healthier life. When we're going through a difficult time, it can be hard to put, those emotions inwards. It can be hard to take care of ourselves, to show ourselves love and accept ourselves in the purest way. But we find it so easy to accept the ones that we love, right? So why can't we accept ourselves? It's just so easy to be there for other people, the ones we love, the ones we care about, our family, our friends, significant others, whatever it is. We want to help them. We want to see them succeed, and we want them to be happy, and we want to be their shoulder to cry on, or whatever they need in their situation. We want all these things for other people, and we do want all these things for ourselves as well, but it can be very difficult to find that compassion for yourself. But having compassion for yourself, it doesn't have to be so different than having compassion for others. What does compassion feel like? When you give compassion to others, you have that feeling inside of you. So, when we recognize someone else's suffering or going through a hard time, we can feel that compassion to be there for them. If you ignore someone's suffering, you can't feel compassion for them and their difficult time that they're going through. Compassion involves feeling moved, I guess, by others' suffering. Therefore, your heart kind of opens up to them and responds to them, their pain and those things that they're going through. But compassion literally means suffer with. I didn't know that before, but when I was doing some research, I learned that it means suffer with. So when you're feeling compassion towards someone else, you're there you want to be there through their suffering and to help them and to be that, that person that they can lean on. So when you feel compassion for others, you feel warmth inside. You have this feeling inside of you. You're caring and you have this desire to help that person suffering. So you're also offering your understanding and kindness towards that person, when they fail or they make a mistake, you accept that rather than being judgmental. So finally, when you feel compassion for someone, you realize that imperfection, suffering, failure, it's a part of the human experience. It's a part of our lives. We're all going to go through it. And so the same goes for self-compassion. You can't ignore your difficult times or your failures. You can't just brush it off and ignore it and not dig down deep into the root of the problem. You have to recognize those, difficult times, those failures as a human experience. That's what we go through. It's normal to be imperfect. It's normal to have those imperfections, to fail, to pick yourself back up. And you have to be kind to yourself. So showing compassion to yourself because, you need to treat yourself well. If you're not treating yourself in the right way, you're never going to be fully happy. It all starts with us, and we have to take care of ourselves, before we can take care of others as well. And before it's like, you have to love yourself before you can love somebody else. And I just think that's so important. You can't judge yourself. Just like you don't want to judge others for things that they're going through. You must be kind and understanding towards yourselves for your emotions. Like I said, if you just have a bad day and you're like mad at yourself for having these heavy emotions, like you need to understand that that's life, and like maybe something happened and it just like a cycle and it was built up, and maybe you just need some extra rest because you're not sleeping well lately. Like whatever the case is, you have to accept those things as life and human experiences, because nobody can be perfect. You can't always have a perfect day. Imperfection is a part of life, and it's so crucial to recognize that, so that you can be compassionate towards others, but be compassionate towards yourself, and kind and loving, and show yourself, if you treat yourself right, you're going to be living a way healthier life. You have to be understanding and accepting, so you can accept all of those life obstacles, and then use them and utilize those things as times to grow, and experiences to base off of for your future self to become better and happier. It is time though for a little bit of a break, but when we get back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what is self-compassion. I have some information from Kirsten Neff. She is a researcher of self-compassion, and there are 3 main elements of self-compassion, and I'm going to go through them with you. So don't go anywhere.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness podcast. We're talking all about self-compassion, and I'm going to go through with you the 3 elements of self-compassion. It's self-kindness. First of all, like I said, we need to be kind to ourselves and take care of ourselves. We have to refrain from harsh criticism. We have to recognize our own humanity, or just the fact that people are imperfect and that we all experience pain. And then mindfulness, maintaining that non-biased awareness of your experiences, even those that are painful, the ones that we struggle through, the ones that we don't really want to face all the time, rather than ignoring them or exaggerating their effect. So let me break down those 3 elements. So number 1 is just self-kindness, having that self-kindness, taking care of ourselves. We need to be warm and understanding. We have to understand our difficult times, the things that we suffer from, our failures, and we have to accept those and appreciate those and look at those as times for growth and, times to be, not just put ourselves down even more for going through hard things, but, taking that opportunity to learn, to gain that knowledge in our lives, and accept it and learn from it and grow from it, rather than ignoring our pain. Like, we can't ignore our pain, especially when we're bombarding ourselves, with self-criticism for things that, we really shouldn't. It's so easy to be hard on ourselves, to expect perfect. And like, I am guilty of this in aspects of my life where it's like, I expect for, I expect perfectionism for a lot of things, and it's hard to get out of that mindset, and we have to try to change our thought patterns so we're not expecting perfectionism, because imperfection is a part of life, and that's what's normal. Like, imperfections is normal, not perfectionism. So you got to recognize that being imperfect and failing and, experiencing life difficulties is a normal thing. It's a part of life. It's a part of the human experience. So we have to be kind to ourselves, and we have to accept those things and not ignore our pain, because if we're going to keep ignoring all our pain and we just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it aside or pushing it down, we're never actually going to learn from it, and we're going to fall into a cycle of self-criticism, being too hard on ourselves, not actually celebrating the things that we deserve to celebrate. And it's so important to celebrate all of our successes and all of our little goals that we achieve in any baby step or large step or leap, like whatever it is. We have to, we have to celebrate those things and appreciate them just as much as we need to appreciate our difficult times as times for growth. And in any scenario, we need to be kind. We need to be kind to ourselves, just like we're kind to others. We can get angry. We can try to punish ourselves for a mistake or something that, we're going through. But if you can't forgive yourself for something that you did, you are never going to be happy with yourself. When we fight against reality and we fight against suffering, this is increasing our stress and our frustration and our self-criticism, because we're just fighting against the world, and that's not fun. You don't want to be pushing and pulling against reality. So when we accept reality and we accept our failures, then we're accepting sympathy and kindness and greater emotional intelligence. We're experiencing more things. We're learning more things. We're growing into the person that we want to be, into the happy, healthy person we want to be, and living our life in that mindset. We got to get aligned with the universe. Number 2 is common humanity, recognizing your own humanity. So what I mean by this is that, often we feel like I am the only person suffering. I am the only person making mistakes. I am the only person failing. I am the oddball out. I am the failure. We isolate ourselves as like, I'm the problem. It's all me. It's me, and that frustration, like that's what it's kind of like it ties into, it's this like irrational, but kind of pervasive sense of isolation, as I am the only one suffering. I am the only one making mistakes. But it's common humanity. Everyone suffers. Everyone goes through things. The very definition of being human means that one is mortal, vulnerable, and imperfect. So self-compassion involves recognizing that suffering and, not being perfect and making mistakes is part of the shared human experience. And we have to look at those things as human experiences, something that we all go through, rather than just, having this mindset that it's all me. I'm the one failing. I'm the one making mistakes. Everyone else's life is perfect. Me. We have to recognize it's common humanity to go through all of these things. And once we can recognize that, we can show more compassion towards ourselves. Like, hey, I'm not the only one that's probably made this mistake before. I'm not the only one that's gone through something like this before. And, that makes you want to reach out to people too, maybe, and, get some like wise words from others that might have gone through the same thing. But once you can realize that it is common humanity to suffer and to make mistakes and to fail and to pick yourself back up, you can show compassion to yourself. You don't have to be so hard on yourself, and you don't have to isolate yourself away from the world just because, you think that like you are the only one going through this, because you're not. It's part of the human experience to be imperfect and to fail. We are humans. That's what happens. We make mistakes, and we get to forgive, and we get to move on, and we get to continue to live a happy life. But we got to find that compassion so we're not criticizing ourselves and bringing ourselves down too low. Now, number 3 is mindfulness. We have to take a balanced approach, to our negative emotions and to those extreme emotions. We have to try to deal with them instead of, suppressing them or exaggerating those emotions. Mindfulness is like the process of relating, our personal experiences to those of others who are also suffering. Putting our own situation into a larger perspective. You're being mindful of everything kind of else going on in the world, putting yourself in a different perspective, seeing it from a different view. You got to have the willingness to observe our negative experiences and our emotions, and we have to be open with those. And we got to take those low points in and appreciate them as areas of growth, and appreciate them as times where we can learn and we can, become the person that we want to be. Mindfulness is non-judgmental. We can just, observe the world, observe our experiences, our emotions, our obstacles, and we have to observe these things in a healthy and non-judgmental way. We have to take the world in and take our experience in and let it affect us. The things that we go through affect us, and that's what forms who we are. And if you want to live a happy and healthy life, you need to let those things affect you, hit you, so that you can have a better understanding of them, and you can turn those negatives into positives, and you can grow and you can become the person that you want to be, and live the life that you want and that you're passionate about and that you feel confident about. You got to keep an open mind so that we can deal with the negative aspects in a more healthy, strategic way. So by being mindful, having this balanced approach to anything negative in our lives, we're not suppressing those negative things down. We're dealing with our emotions. We're letting them affect us so that we can turn our mindset into a positive, and we can fix that and then live the life that we want to. Being mindful means that we're not over-identifying things, with our thoughts or our feelings. We're not getting caught up in the things that aren't really our reality. Just because we're going through something at some time and we feel all these extreme emotions, that's not who we are. But the way that we handle those situations and the way that we let those things affect us and the way that we take our mindset from those things, that forms who we are as a person, that forms our lives. So we need to focus on the reality, and we need to take a step back and be mindful, sometimes get a new perspective, a larger perspective, look at it from the outside in, and you're going to have a better understanding of why these things are happening. You're going to become more mindful, and when you're more mindful for yourself, you're going to automatically feel more compassion, and you're going to be kinder to yourself because you're going to be accepting and open and learning from these things and not taking them as a bunch of negativity in your life. I hope those 3 elements made sense. I think they're great 3 elements of self-compassion. It's a really great 3 building blocks to kind of focus on to really start feeling that self-compassion towards yourselves and breaking it down a little bit more. It is time though for another break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back, I'm going to jump into what self-compassion is not, so that we can, identify when we are having self-compassion and when we're not, and when we're experiencing different things, and so that we can change our mindset to be compassionate towards ourselves, and not be selfish or not feel like we're self-indulging or anything like that. So stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
listening to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast. Self-compassion, what is it not? Well, it's not three things. It's not self-pity, it's not self-indulgence, and it's not self-esteem. People often confuse self-esteem and self-compassion as the same thing because they may seem very similar. Self-esteem refers to our sense of self-worth, our value or how much we like ourselves, while, there is a little doubt that, low self-esteem is problematic, and it often leads to, mental problems like depression and your lack of motivation. And, so trying to have higher self-esteem can also be problematic, though, as well. You have to find that balance with your self-esteem. We often think that it's not okay to be average, which leads us to attempt, to raise our self-esteem. But this could actually kind of lead us to be narcissistic. We can be self-absorbed when we become obsessed with having this high self-esteem. It can lead us down this wrong path, and it puts others down, when we have this dying need to have this highest self-esteem. The need for high self-esteem, it can encourage us to ignore or, kind of distort or hide personal things because we don't want to accept them. Because we can't see ourselves clearly or accurately because our self-esteem is getting in our way. But our self-esteem often aligns, with our latest successes or our failures. If something happens in our life and we don't like the way we handle it or something, that our self-esteem drops, or if something really good happens, our self-esteem raises. But self-compassion is not based on self-evaluations. When it comes to self-esteem, it's like, oh, I did this, and this, I feel crappy about myself. Or I did this, and this, I feel great about myself. But that's not self-compassion because it's not based on evaluating the things that you're doing in your life. We feel compassion because we all deserve compassion and understanding. And we need to understand that, it's not because we possess this, particular trait, like being pretty or smart or talented or achieving all of our goals that we want. When we have self-compassion, you don't have to feel better than others, to feel good about yourself. You don't have to compare. Comparing is a huge thing with self-esteem, I believe. But self-compassion isn't dependent on any external circumstances, situations, people. Self-compassion is always available. It's always associated with our greater, emotional well-being, the more accurate self-concepts, having that self-kind behavior towards ourselves. It's not about how, we're reflecting on recent things in our lives. Self-compassion is also not self-indulgence. Many people say that you're kind of reluctant to be self-compassionate because they're afraid that they would let themselves, just kind of get away with anything, just kind of use it as like a cop-out in a sense. But self-indulgence is not self-compassion. Being compassionate to yourself means that you want to be happy and healthy in the long term. So giving into our pleasures, whatever that might be, food like sweets or drinking, smoking, being a couch potato, some of these like pleasures can harm our well-being and, how we are doing our lives. But while giving yourself health and like lasting happiness, that involves changing a certain amount of displeasure, quitting smoking, losing weight, not always indulging in those treats, exercising, not being a couch potato. We're hard on ourselves because, we feel like we need to change an aspect in our life or a habit, and we shame ourselves for doing those things. We feel shameful for smoking or drinking or being a couch potato, indulging in treats every day. So we shame ourselves into those things, so these actions of coming out of that are coming out of shame and not actually wanting to better ourselves for the long term. But self-compassion is about just wanting to be kind to yourself and love yourself so that you can continue to love your happy and healthy life long-term down the road. Because we simply need to face the truth about everything in our lives, about our habits and the way that we do things, and we have to change for the right reasons and not because we feel shame or we're being hard on ourselves. It's because we want to take care of ourselves. And I think that's the really big difference is we have to want to change or switch our habits or change our lifestyle for the long term and for the right reasons instead of, because we feel crappy about ourselves. We feel shame because of we're doing something. Lastly, self-compassion is not self-pity. When we feel self-pity, we become, obsessed and covered and buried and just immersed in our own problems. We forget that others have similar problems as well. We ignore, interactions with others, and we just instead feel like we are the only ones in the world suffering. We have no outside perspective. We just see ourselves. And self-pity emphasizes, our ego, our egocentric feelings of, separation from others, and it exaggerates the extent, of our personal suffering, like, how we're really feeling. And self-pity, we become wrapped up in our own problems. It's as easy as that. We become immersed, buried, taken over by our own problems, and we just sulk in our own problems. We're not able to take a step back and get a different perspective. We cannot adapt to a more balanced or, objective way of looking at our lives. But, when we have self-compassion, we allow ourselves to relate to other people's experiences without, the feeling of isolation and disconnection. With self-compassion, we're able to take a mental space from our problems and the things that we're going through, and we can, recognize human experiences and the extent of human experiences, and we can put things in a greater perspective instead of just immersing ourselves in our own problems and our own self-pity. So now, to finish off this episode, I'm going to give you some direct tips on how to become more self-compassionate. So the first one that I think is super helpful, especially if you're really having a hard time feeling compassionate towards yourself and you've really noticed that recently, you're hard on yourself. Write a letter to yourself from the point of view of a compassionate friend or family member every single day for a week. So you have to write a letter from someone else's point of view, what one of your friends would say to you or who would ever be there for you, right? Like, what would they say? Write yourself a letter every single day for an entire week. This is so helpful just to get yourself to see a different perspective. Journaling is also really helpful, like having those self-reflections and looking back on those things and kind of journaling and writing down things that happened to us and the way like we dealt with our emotions and how we coped or how we didn't cope with those things, and kind of looking back and forth, and that can really help us see growth and see progress and see reasons why we should be compassionate towards ourselves. Writing about, just personal imperfections, because this is going to increase your mindfulness. So if there's things that you want to work on, but you want to work on them for the right reasons, combined with changes in your techniques of personal criticism, you can really tackle those things. Another one would be maintaining a self-care routine. Meeting your personal needs can really increase your ability just to, really care for yourself just like you care for others. When our personal wellness is going down, it's declining, negative feelings, might often kind of be coming up. So if we take care of ourselves and we get into that normal routine of doing things that make us happy, we're going to have more compassion towards ourselves and more understanding, and we're going to be nicer to ourselves. This is kind of an interesting one. Treat yourself as you would a small child. You know how you're a small, you kind of treat a small child very gentle. kind and just open, and you see the world, how it's affecting them, and it's beautiful because they don't see a worry in the world. They don't see anything dark. They see bright, vibrant colors, and you help them paint that picture by being kind and compassionate and empathetic and caring towards those people. Remember that you're not alone. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. It's okay to be imperfect. Forgive yourself for those things that you need to work through, or you made a mistake. Forgive yourself for those mistakes, because that's what they are. They're a mistake. Work with others too. Talk to others that care about you. Getting compassion from others can help you see why you need to give compassion to yourself. Celebrate your successes, small, medium, large, huge, microscopic, whatever it is. Celebrate everything you do, because it's so cool to see progress in yourself, and it's so important to recognize those things. Practice your mindfulness, your yoga, your meditation. You're becoming more self-aware. You can practice mindfulness anywhere you are, in a grocery store lineup. You just gotta be mindful and open. So make peace with your inner critic. Who is the hardest on you? It's probably you. You are probably the hardest on yourself. So practice your forgiveness, forgive yourself for things, and just develop a growth mindset. Take your lows, take your failures as areas of growth, as opportunities to learn and to experience, and, to be a better person later on down the road. Express gratitude to yourself. This one's important because, if you notice what you have in your life, and you notice the good things in your life, and you notice all the great things that you've done, and the kind deeds that you've done, the random acts of kindness, being there for others, it might help you recognize, like, hey, I do some really great things, and sometimes I make mistakes, and that's okay, and I need to show myself compassion for making those mistakes, and being there for myself, and treating myself well. That is all, though, the information that I have for you today on self-compassion. I hope it kind of gave you a new perspective to be kind to yourself and gentle, just like we need to be kind and gentle to other people in our world. And we got to be there for ourselves, just like we're there for our close family and friends and for other people. It all starts within you if you want to live your happy and healthy life. So, start now. Start showing yourself compassion now, and opening up your mind and realizing that imperfection, mistakes, and failure, it's normal, and it's a great opportunity to grow. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button, you like and follow us on social media, and you leave a 5-star review. It means the world. I look forward to sharing more information with you next time. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.